As long as video games have been available, there have always been those who create and develop their own game without the backing and or support of the major developers and publishers. Some were just quick parodies that never saw public release, while others took a more serious approach. In these days of digital distribution, especially with the advent of technology like smartphones, tablets, and of course, Steam and the various online networks from our major consoles, independent developers are finding new audiences, new ways to distribute, and most importantly, giving us fresh new ideas, all designed to appeal to the whole range of gamers, from the casual to the hardcore. We discuss the growing popularity and appeal of indie games right here on Downloadable Content. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Downloadable Content. I'm Brian, and with me, Ron.
Hey, everyone.
Wyatt, welcome back.
Hello.
And yet another newbie. We welcome John to the fray.
Hello.
Don't worry, he will come out of this alive.
I hope so. I got games to play.
Yeah, don't worry. There is. Well, you're not going to get a weird hazing ritual or anything like that. Nothing like that. But yes, we are going to discuss indie games. Now, I did an episode 2 years ago in which we talked about mobile games, and you know, it's very mind-boggling to think that just 2 years ago we were in the craze of Facebook games, Caféville, Farmville, Fuck Your Motherville, Mafia Wars, all of that crazy, and now it's all gone. The Facebook games is pretty much wiped out, with just probably a couple of stalwarts still left, like Words with Friends. You know, Angry Birds was huge just 2 years ago, and now that's kind of faded into obscurity. And you know, we did.
It has at least 4 to 5 different crossovers, 2 or 3 spin-off games, and my girlfriend plays all of them. So I wouldn't say that, but it's not as big.
I see Angry Birds now more in my supermarket, where they have Angry Birds freezer pops, gummies, crackers, fruit snacks. The marketing promotion for Angry Birds is kind of like Mario in the early 90s. We haven't gotten an Angry Birds cereal yet. Give it time, it'll get there. But yes, we're going to talk about indie games because I think we can all agree, that section of gaming has been on a sharp increase. Much more so than, you know, consoles and things like that. Indie games have been just rapidly on the rise. And I think it's great because, you know, while the major developers are busy giving us, you know, sequel after sequel after sequel after reboot after sequel after sequel, the indie games are being experimental, and I like that. I like that a lot. It's kind of refreshing to see, especially when you go to a convention like PAX East, where indie developers get a huge chunk of expo floor. It's great to see.
Oh, I love the mega booth. Absolutely love it.
I spent most of my time, anytime I was on the expo floor, I always found myself gravitating toward the indie booth because that's where the ideas are. I'm like, okay, yeah, good. And there's another Resident Evil game. Oh, look, there's you know, oh, look, another Elder Scrolls game. Great. But, you know, you get to the indie booth and whoa! It's like
Not to mention, no lines to wait on at all. So I got to play pretty much every game I wanted to at the indie booth. Meanwhile, The Last of Us didn't even get to touch.
Yeah, so, but but we'll open the discussion with what do we think constitutes an indie game? Establish a definition, if you will. So, Wyatt, we'll start with you.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Wake up, sir!
What constitutes an indie game? I mean, there's so many different ways you can say. You can say that it's something that it's a new idea, a new concept that's being developed, like almost the B-sides of something. Like, for example, Epic Games, guys that do Gears of War, are creating a game where you're fighting off kind of like creatures or like the boogeymen by making makeshift forts in the middle of your like neighborhoods at night. It's supposed to be this very kiddish game, and it's not getting like any amount of that budget. It's their little side project. Some people would consider that an indie game. Other people would consider an indie game something that's been made by only 2 or 3 or even just one person that have worked in labor of love, and really they don't have the funding for it. They're just going to put it together. It's weird. I really feel like the indie game definition can keep morphing and changing, but I think the one thing that the way you can define an indie game is what you can define an indie game not to be, which would be like a AAA game or a very established franchise. So like Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil 5, those would not be considered indie games.
Did you have to bring that one up of
Yes,
all titles?
I had to, because I know that you're a Resident Evil fanboy, and that's been hating you for a while. So I like to spite you for that.
You and I are really like a married couple.
We are a married couple,
sweetie.
Let me just
Okay.
play Revelations and forget 6 happened.
Anyway, Halo is another great example. All those other games where there's it's sequel after sequel. Everyone knows what they are. You see Call of Duty show up, and you're like, well, okay, I know what game this is gonna be. There's nothing to really. You know what it's going to be, and each sequel is going to be more of the same. Yes, there might be twists or changes, but there's a formula that's been created, and you know what that's going to be developed by. So, like, an indie game is definitely not a sequel, like sort of that sequel, that sort of AAA style where it's going to be polished, it's going to be published for $60. Indie games typically run more towards, again, not quite as polished, smaller game companies. Smaller amounts of money to buy into the games. Again, this is all general because it can change left and right, but that's the general term that I would agree for it. Let me actually ask all of you guys, Plants vs. Zombies. Consider like this awesome game, but it's developed by PopCap. Would we consider that an indie game? Or would it just like a mobile game? What would you consider Plants vs. Zombies?
Well, it's published by EA, so I kind of consider it not to be an indie game, though PopCap is probably one of the biggest companies that feels indie to me still.
I can agree with that. I mean, as you were giving your what you think is your definition of an indie game, I tend to agree with the definition that it's made by a small-time developer that has really no backing or support from the big guys. That's how I tend to define it. Plants vs. Zombies, as John just mentioned, it feels indie. I mean, they have the backing of EA.
Actually, I think EA only picked them up a couple of years ago.
Yeah. I mean, they're still new to the scene, and Plants vs. Zombies is an incredibly popular game. So.
It's like that. That's kind of the one that I kind of go to and see that as sort of the crux of the question of what is an indie game, because a lot of people see it as an indie game because it's a brand new idea. It's fun. It's not entirely polished. It's not entirely like to a sheen. It's kind of its brand new own niche. But at the same time, it's been developed by some big names. PopCap was known for doing like very casual games, so that was their first foray into doing something not quite as casual. Does that make it not an indie game, or does it?
I see indie as independent, as pretty much by the book, someone without a publisher or doing it by themselves. So I'm kind of on the fence about that.
And Ron, are you there, or are you still?
I'm still here. No, like for me, I consider an indie developer someone with a small company, small people, like very few number of people developing it, like 20 or less. The budget's generally very small. There's generally a long development cycle for these two, because it's not like you have 500 people working on one game trying to like polish up every single thing.
So I think that we're kind of somewhat veering toward that idea that what we think is an indie game is exactly that. It's made by an independent group without, without the word is on the tip of my tongue. Without the huge support and fame of some of the big developers, Capcom, EA, Square, Konami, what have you.
Right, and let's just use like what a lot of people consider to be one of the token first indie games for like the modern era, which would be Braid.
Yeah, actually, I think it was one of the first ones to come out on Xbox Live.
I mean, there was a lot of indie games before. There was a lot of small games. I mean, actually, Xbox Live was an attempted project back in 2004 on the original Xbox when Xbox Live had first started, and then Xbox Arcade. Then Xbox Arcade was brought back to the 360 in 2005, I believe. And as that was developed and as that was kind of brought in, it was there for a while, but you didn't really go there that often. It was like you get small B-side things. Braid was one of the first games that really grabbed the indie genre. It was like, hey, look, this is a thing. It elevated a game to an art form, and a lot of people consider Braid for doing that and adding new ideas and new concepts. And they're like, wow, how did just one person do this? And a lot of people grab that idea and just start running with it. That's my idea, anyway, or my thought process.
Perfectly valid. I mean, given that, especially with this generation of consoles, I think it's safe to say that we can all agree on that there's been really a lack of new ideas. This generation has been loaded with sequels and reboots and re-releases of older games, especially toward the second half of this generation. The ideas, new IPs, new ideas seem to taper off, and I think that in a sense, and a good chunk of the rise of indie games is attributed to that lack of originality coming from the big guys. Because the big guys are afraid to take risk, especially when you have a bit of a shaky economy. And when you have a small group of developers with not a whole lot of money, they're going to devote more time and also get experimental. They're not afraid to get experimental because they don't really have a whole lot to lose.
A great example of this would actually be 38 Studios and the Kingdoms of Amalur. Is anyone familiar with that game?
I've only heard it by name.
I have that game, actually.
I loved it. I've gotten every single thing you can in that game, played through it, beat every achievement, just went through it. I love that thing. Mainly because R.A. Salvatore, one of my favorite authors, wrote on it. It was this weird, huge thing. Anyone familiar with 38 Studios? It was bought out by a baseball player who decided, I'm going to make a video game industry. I'm going to make a video game company. Makes video game company. Starts throwing money and gets grants from the state to create this gaming company and create revenue, and he starts making this huge game, and he gets one of the lead designers from Oblivion. He gets, I believe, Seth MacFarlane from the Spawn comics to do the artwork, and he gets R.A. Salvatore to help oversee the fluff. And they decided to make an independent, and an IP, a new, not a sequel, this brand new thing that comes out of nowhere, new story, new world. And this thing comes out right next to Skyrim. And it's a great game. I consider it to be almost like a more polished combat-heavy Fable. It's a lot of fun to play through, a lot of lore, everything that you would imagine from a AAA game that tried some new things. But because it was a $60 game, a lot of people didn't buy it. A lot of people didn't get the payout that everyone was promising from a AAA game. And because of that, that studio is now gone. Just because it didn't make its amount and didn't get that promised quota that it wanted to, because AAA games or concepts or what have you are so rooted into the business market and business model, and it didn't perform, that was gone. They were going to make a MMO. A lot of people were looking forward to that. That's now gone. A lot of those that new concept, that new idea, that new game world is vanished because the money was dropped out, and actually there's a huge debate and lawsuits and all that behind the developer of 38 Studios or the founder of it. But when an indie game tanks or does well, and there's only got 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people working on it, you don't have those constraints. They're doing it for, I mean, they're probably doing it for the money too, but they can do it for the fun of it, and if it makes some money, oh great, that's fantastic. But if it doesn't do well, it's not as if they have to, in a lot of ways, answer up to anyone. There's a little bit more independence.
And certainly a lot more creative freedom when you don't have the demands of a publisher who is only really looking to pad the bottom line. That's just the way of it. Especially when now a lot of indie games are crowdfunded.
Oh yeah.
And because a lot of indie games get their backing from sites like Kickstarter, it allows people who donate a say in the game's creation or the development.
Right, which is now a whole new thing, and there's a lot of people like Double Fine Studios, which is, a lot of people would say is an indie company. It's starting to get a little bit bigger, but it's still very like an independent. They get their own funding, they try to, and the way that they've made themselves try to break free from working with larger developers or publishers is by doing crowdfunding. They're actually crowdfunding their second or third game, Massive Chalice, because they had other games that were really good, and they actually did pretty well on Xbox Live, like Iron Brigade and other ones, but they can't make sequels. They can't work with those. They can't work with those IPs anymore because they've been locked in due to copyright. So there are some other groups and organizations that you might not even consider to be indie, or they might be big names, but they want to make an independent product and not be constrained by the business system anymore.
Also true. That's when you are free from the demands of the developer/publisher model. That's the standard business model for a game. You're free to do pretty much whatever the hell you like, and get experimental and get creative, and you don't have to worry. I mean, obviously, if you make the game for your sake, but also, if it makes money, then hey, great, let's keep going. And we've seen a lot of good games that have been crowdfunded. I mean, we saw plenty of them at PAX, which is another great way for indie developers to get their name out. Because, I mean, let's face it, the big websites, IGN, Game Informer, sites like that, their main focus is on consoles and PC games. I don't really get a whole lot of news about indie games. A lot of great stuff that I saw at PAX I would not have seen otherwise.
Yeah, I think my favorite of that show was Delver's Drop, and I dropped about 50 on their Kickstarter on the bus ride home from the show because I was so in love with it. Yeah, on the Megabus, I hopped right onto their Wi-Fi, and actually, their alpha is coming out next week for Kickstarter backers, and I'm really excited to play it because whatever build they had at the floor was just like the bare bones of their concept, and after a couple of months, they finally got something together to show people.
There were some games that I saw, at PAX that I really, really want to pick up. There was a fighting game called Dive Kick, which just looks hilarious.
Oh my god.
Dive Kick looks ridiculous. It's just taking the fighting genre and reducing it down to its most ridiculous, minimalist form, and it's hilarious and really competitive at the same time somehow.
Yeah, it has a lot of depth, surprisingly.
Let's see, I saw Saturday Morning RPG, which looks hilarious. And I saw Big Fly Baseball, because, I'm the baseball nut. Yes, it is possible to be a sports nerd and a video game nerd. It can work. Don't ask how, but it can work. And I noticed, though, the availability, there's a lot of indie games out on PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, and even the virtual, the Wii Shop Store, or the Wii U eShop, as they call it. But also, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the vast majority of them, though, are pretty much iOS or Android titles.
A lot of them are because it's the new frontier, and that seems to be the way that it naturally grew with because of things like Angry Birds and the free-to-play market. Just like the iOS crowd is where a lot of developers can make really quick games relatively fast and not have to ask for a lot of money for it because they're not going for high price point. They're just going for as many purchases as possible.
Well, that's one of the appeals is, surely is the low price point for many games. What, $15? I think the most expensive ones I've seen are 15.
If at that.
What?
If at that. Most indie games I see can go anywhere from like 5 to 15.
Yeah, I've never seen an indie game higher than $15.
There are some indie games that can go higher, like 20, but yes, 15 is a big price point. When you go onto like iOS and Android, it goes down to like 5, 10, $1, $2. It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's usually around $1 on the App Store because of how Apple pushes so many smaller apps. What ends up happening is that people will sell a game on the Nintendo the eShop for like $5, $10. We'll end up selling it for $1, $2 on the iOS platform because it sells better that way. They actually make more money just from selling more copies.
Of course. I mean, people play these games on their tablets or smartphones. The one problem is I don't have $400 to drop on an iPad. So, I'll have to wait.
Yeah.
This is why I'm actually looking forward to the upcoming Ouya console, which I think is going to be the dark horse and win the next generation.
I'll be honest, I have not touched the Ouya because I'm afraid. Like that and the Oculus Rift, I know those are two brand new things that are coming out of nowhere, and I know that they're probably going to bowl over a lot of people and change it. But I've got enough things to do on my Xbox and enough things to do on my computer and my miniatures. I don't need a new console, not yet. I already looked at Towerfall for the Ouya. I'm like, that looks amazing. No, I can't look anymore because if I keep looking, I will buy it, and that's bad. I need my money.
It's only $100. No,
don't stop it. Stop.
Oh man, that actually does sound tempting.
It's mutual tempting. I go to Wyatt's place. He tempts me with board games that I have to get.
Oh, I've been away from that now.
Board games and Xbox Live games I have to get. Now I have to return the tempting in kind. So the PAX influence definitely helps because they give a huge spotlight on indie games, and it's great. And I think the indie developers need a bit of that bump. I mean, there have been some amazing titles coming out of there. I will squee more about it in the second half, but Bastion.
We'll probably spend a good 5-10 minutes on Bastion. Let's not even lie.
Oh, I wish I'd played it.
An hour. And then this PAX East Battle Block Theater, which, oh my god, that's fun. That is a fun game. But yes, that's the more indie games get out to the public, I think it can only lead to great things. I think one of you mentioned before the show a movie, Indie Game the Movie.
Oh yeah.
I've
never heard of this, so enlighten me.
Really?
John, you want to take this one?
Yeah, this is kind of the movie that I think got a lot of people to be more aware of indie games. It covered specifically the biggest thing in the movie was Ed McMillan and Tommy Reffinez in development of Super Meat Boy. And it kind of covered how they kind of got screwed over by Microsoft in the process of getting it onto Xbox Live, and followed their last few months of crunch getting the game out, and then eventually becoming a huge success because of it. And then with that, it kind of followed up with Jonathan Blow years after Braid came out, and how he handled the success of it and what he did with it, and Phil Fish and Fez, and when he presented it, I think at PAX 2012, if I'm right, and he had a huge legal fiasco with the programmer of the game and almost didn't get it out. And it really enlightened people to the struggles of making an indie game and kind of how difficult it is, and how rewarding it can be for people to create something that is entirely their own and get it out to so many people.
It's not even the movie doesn't even like really glorify indie games. I mean, it glorifies indie gaming as this bastion of being able to do, a lot of new things, a lot of new ideas, but it really kind of goes through the struggle of the indie game developer and the maker, because now they're trying to do something all on their own, and what the process is. So like one of it was how Jonathan Blow, the guy who made Braid, is it kind of, what's the word that I would use for it, John? Would be, he's very ornery. And he's got a lot of his own opinions, and when he tries to, when people are like, "Oh, this is what Braid's about," because it was very much like an very artistic piece, and all this, like, no, this isn't what Braid's about. It's about this and all that. Or when he would try to talk about his game publicly, people would say they love the game, but then when they try talking about, they'd be like, "Oh, you should fix this and this, and you're an idiot. You're stupid if you're not. Why aren't you doing it this way?" Super Meatball, yes, it goes into very much the process of Xbox Live and working in the system, the business system, and trying to get into the business system where you do have AAA games, where you do have much bigger names that are publishing things, that are getting things out there, and you have to fight against all of that. And there's a portion where they're supposed to go on Xbox Live, and they're supposed to go and start working on it that morning, like they're about to start that, and they're not actually on that day. They're actually not there on the main page, and they're freaking out because they're about to get screwed over. They were told they had to rush this. They had to get this out for, I think it was like for the summer of arcade, and working through that. And then of course with Fez, how he struggles with working with just one other partner, and how he's having a really hard time trying to get the developer, his game to work, something that he poured his heart and mind and soul into to trying to get this established. And in the movie, you kind of see the guy who made Fez not as like a perfect person. Obviously, he seems very, very anxious, very, very cantankerous. Just not always positive emotions with the developers, but it's really going through the process of making the games and how making them in a system where you have all of these, AAA titles and all of these massive corporations can be really difficult and struggling, but it's static when you get it to work.
Let's spend a few minutes actually elaborating, because actually this was pretty new to me in terms of I've just read this in the most recent second most recent issue of Game Informer about how indie developers are leaving Microsoft in droves.
Oh yeah.
So let's spend a few minutes of time for those who may not have heard or is aware of this recent trend. From what I gathered from reading the article and reading stuff about it online, developers are just leaving Microsoft and going to other places like Sony and even Nintendo, because I'm guessing Microsoft requires a developer to have a publisher.
Correct.
Yes.
And if you are an incredibly small developing group who doesn't have a lot of money to burn, that can be a problem. Because from what I read, it basically said if you do manage to get a publisher for your game, at that point, pretty much you lose control of the game as to when it gets released. You're now on Microsoft's time.
Yes.
Pretty much.
And it's basically caused a lot of developers to get screwed over.
For developers, for Microsoft, from what the article says, is that there was basically only two ways you could get a game on Xbox Live. One, you get a publisher, and they help publish your game, or you have Microsoft be your publisher, and you get licensed under their Microsoft Studios. And in both cases, in both situations, you basically lose any sort of right to when the game gets released, how you want to release it, any sort of marketing for the game. Like, I believe the article mentions like for Super Meat Boy, they were supposed to be part of like the summer of like the summer of arcade or whatever for the Xbox Live promotion blitz, but they never got on the front page of that promotion.
Yeah, I remember following those guys around the time Meat Boy released, and I think those two were the ones to start the whole, pretty much getting everyone to tell people how bad Microsoft was with handling indies. Because before that, Microsoft seemed to be the company that promoted a lot of indies with at least Castle Crashers and Braid and some of the other indie games that came out on Xbox Live Arcade.
One of the ones that I remember early on was Shadow Complex.
Yes.
Yeah, that was partially handled by Epic or published by Epic or something. But yeah, that seemed like that was the place for small games to, thrive. And then Meat Boy comes out, and you see Team Meat on Twitter going on about how bad Microsoft treated them, and more and more developers realized that they didn't have to put up with it, and they didn't mind burning bridges because other places were starting to welcome these developers in because they saw how much profit indie games made and how much Microsoft was going to be losing in that.
Hey, keep in mind too, like right around the time Team Meat is doing this, like they're basically shining a spotlight on Microsoft being the big evil corporation that it is. They gasp. You have
oh noes.
Yeah, you have Steam was doing a very large push into the indie scene around that time too. Keep in mind, like this 2011, 2010, like Steam's really just starting to build up like its reputation as a digital provider of games of like any shape or size. Like this was around a time when like Steam was getting a lot of the AAA games as well as the community-made games, and then after Team Meat did that, and like they talked about Microsoft, like people actually went through the fine print and actually like read it, like not just like the indie developers, but the fans went and started reading through it too, and they went, "Oh, you mean like you don't get like next to no money from this, even though we buy the game partially to support you guys, but like Microsoft would get 30%, the publisher would get like 20%, and another 10% or 15% probably go to some other individual group or persons, and then the last 30% goes to the indie developer themselves." Well, we don't want that. We want to be able to give as much money as possible to these indie developers to show that, hey, we support your game, we support your ideas. We want you to make more games, we want you to make better games, we want you to improve upon your ideas and give birth to them.
And the fact of the matter is that, Microsoft, with its policies, I mean, even apparently what I read, even with regard to putting out patches for games was, trouble.
Oh, yeah, I think that was a huge problem with Fez because there was some game-breaking bug for half the players that would like corrupt one of their save or something, and Phil Fish had to decide between fixing that for people and spending lots of money or just leaving it be and letting it sit.
Yeah, the thing they mentioned that like the patch would cost him like about $40,000, which to any AAA developer is nothing, but for like an indie developer, $40,000, hey, that's a lot of money.
Yeah,
it's where you get that gap that really hurts the indie developers. And as much as Xbox Live has allowed for people to become aware of this other market, so to speak, in traditional gaming, it's really painful and it's really starting to come down. If you can't get the funding, if you really are a company of just 4 or 5 people and you don't strike that sweet spot like Braid, like so many different games, Bastion, State of Decay most recently, Limbo, that's what I was thinking of, Limbo. Like it comes out at the exact right time and it hits the center page at the exact right time. It's fantastic. I know that I saw a game, Skulls of the Shogun, on the PAX East floor in 2011. It finally came out last summer of arcade, I think. Yeah, it came out like last summer of arcade on Xbox Live, And I got the game. I've tried playing it a few times after that point, and like there's no one on the multiplayer community. It was this big thing that they were trying to promote using Skulls of the Shogun, that you can play Xbox Live with Windows 8 players, you can play anywhere, and just because it's not promoted right or otherwise, and they don't have the, they have to rely on all their promotion on Xbox or on the Microsoft. Things can go south really quick if you're just not in the right time in the right place. Now, I don't know how well Skulls of the Shogun is doing, but like we don't hear about it as much as we hear about other games that manage that moment. Another good example from I saw on PAX was Orcs Must Die. Orcs Must Die 1 was an amazing game. It's on Steam. It's on Xbox Live. It went to Xbox Live first. Then what happened was that it was obviously it went to Steam, like you were saying, Ron. And Orcs Must Die 2 has only come out on Steam. Nothing about it on Xbox, and that's really telling.
Like, I think the article mentioned, like, for the Orcs Must Die developer, like, he went on Xbox Live first, and then went to Steam, and, like, it's multiples of times more sales on the Steam than it is on Xbox. So, it's just, like, it's just very telling with how that like Microsoft handles such a thing. Like if it was marketed better or something like that, maybe Orcs Must Die might be on Orcs Must Die 2 might be on Xbox as well. But because of
keep going.
But because of like the marketing issue, then I'm pretty sure I would have to look and make sure. But didn't Orcs Must Die come out during like August or September of last year or 2 years ago?
It was released. I'm looking up some information right now. It was demonstrating PAX East Expo 2011. It came out October 5th, 2011. Was released then October 12th on for Windows PC, and then it was brought to Steam soon after that.
Yeah, so October 5th, like you're talking right when people are looking for those major holiday releases. So.
Also, wasn't there an issue, I think, with the game Oddworld, where Microsoft had this thing about multi-platform release?
Oh yeah, they usually want timed exclusivity on it, like for them to have the game for probably a few months at least.
But I mean, that's the problem of working in the business model. Not a lot of developers have the time or the money to do something like that.
Yeah, so there's this huge part of indie games where it's, you want to work in the system so you can make money, so you can do what you love, but you have to work inside the big system while still trying to retain that authenticity of being a small game company. And some people can do it, and some people just get lucky. Other ones make really good games and they get overlooked. It's just up and down. It's hard for me to quantify in a lot of ways.
And then, of course, you have Steam and instant money. No.
Well, Steam, Steam known for its amazing sales, where other business models look at that and go, you can't make money by publishing games like that, by making all the games go down 50%. And other developers and indie games are like, no, we like that because then we're getting our product out there and people know about it and we get more sales. And we don't have to, when they do it through Steam, they don't have to worry about giving this much to Xbox and this much to that. I mean, yes, I'm sure that Valve gets their fair share, but it's not anywhere in relation to some of these other organizations. They can publish things without developers. And actually, Steam now has a huge new thing that I've sadly and shamefully not actually looked into as much as I should have, which is Greenlight. Have you looked into that?
Yeah, I looked into it a little bit. Basically, from what I understand, Greenlight is Steam is saying, hey, we're going to invest a little bit into the developers, but you, the community, chooses where we invest that money into and what we promote. So you're starting to see a lot more indie games. If they say like Steam Greenlit, then it means that the community of Steam thinks that this game is worth investing in or worth playing. So that generally means that if your game is greenlit, then you probably going to get a very large boost to your sales than if it wasn't.
It almost sounds like a once removed version of Kickstarter.
yes, it's like a Kickstarter, but there's still a level of mass control. There's still a level of control from Valve where they can kind of monitor a little bit. And I don't think you put money towards Greenlight Games. I mean, if you put money towards it, it's for you to buy a copy of it. It's not like Kickstarter where you're be like, I'm going to spend $1,000 and get all these free exclusive items.
As far as I know, there's no money involved at all. The developer I think has to pay $100 to get it on Greenlight, which is not bad considering the costs of other places. But users only have the option to vote on it, and any donations I think are handled by the developer either through links on the description or outside of Steam entirely. But the point of Greenlight is just getting the games onto Steam and nothing else.
Right, yeah, there's no money involved. The only money comes into is that once it's on Steam, or once it starts going into early access, you can buy into the game, so you can have access to the game early, maybe help out a little bit. I know there's some Greenlight games that do that, where it's like, okay, we got greenlit, because you guys voted for us. You vote for the games that look really interesting that you would actually buy once it comes out. Once a certain amount of votes goes towards a greenlit game, Valve will work towards making sure it gets out there.
Excellent. That sounds like a good system. And I know Sony and Nintendo are opening up their arms a bit more actually, with indie games as well, PlayStation Network and the eShop. I mean, just this past E3, the fact that there were no indie games shown at Microsoft's press conference was extremely telling, whereas Sony and Nintendo devoted a chunk of their press conference, or in Nintendo's case, their Nintendo Direct, to the indie games, which I thought was great.
If we keep talking about Microsoft like this, we're going to derail horribly, right?
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
we're just getting it off our chest.
God, but yeah, Nintendo specifically seems to have changed a lot, because I remember they used to require developers to have office space just to be able to get their game onto like WiiWare or the eShop. And what developers would end up doing is renting out this space, putting a single desk in it, and just showing up every once in a while, but just for the sake of having it on the Wii. And thankfully, they've gotten rid of that.
Thank God, because Nintendo, at least during the Wii's cycle, had a size limit. The game could not exceed a certain file size, which is why Sonic 4 Episode 1 is available on Wii, but not Episode 2.
Oh yeah, that's actually Meat Boy was originally planned to be a Nintendo game, and that didn't work out because the game grew too large for the Wii's size limit. They didn't have enough money to publish it in stores either, so it just moved on to the next publisher, which ended up being Microsoft.
It's very funny how these things are changed. Like Microsoft was the bastion of being. I'm going to keep using bastion by accident. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make puns. But Microsoft was the place where you can go to Xbox. You could go and make arcade games. Like, hey, it was like almost the first forerunner for allowing arcade games not to be something that you hear about from your friend. Like, oh, hey, did you hear about this one thing this guy made? And you can find it on this website. And, download it on its own. It really allowed publicity to come to arcade games, and for that, I will always be grateful to Microsoft, to the idea of Xbox Live Arcade.
Absolutely.
But the thing is that Microsoft, as it's being shown, when they smell money, things get weird, and they and they keep locking down, and how like a lot of things happen, not just in the video game world, is that the more you try to look at something as being unique and hip and its own thing and not part of the man, the more it has a chance of becoming the man, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Becoming more of the machine that it already is. So it's really nice that Steam has really picked up the torch, and the fact that Microsoft has decided to stop playing with Mario and Luigi long enough to help with indie games is really nice.
Actually, speaking of like people becoming the man, I'm kind of happy that Microsoft turned back their DRM policy, because that puts competition back against the PS4 where there kind of wasn't. And I'm hoping to see Microsoft try to step it up and try to make it better for indies in the future. And I mean, it's a long shot considering how Microsoft handles things, but
considering that Microsoft just basically got cold cocked.
Yeah, it prevents the PS4 from becoming what the Xbox is.
Yeah, I think there's also too for talking about like the PlayStation thing, like from the from what I saw and what I've read about how PlayStation is handling the indie developer, they basically said, okay, here's your say I'm a publisher or a developer for an indie game. I go to Sony and say, hey, I'm gonna put this game in your system. They go, cool, that sounds good. Make sure it's like there's no game-breaking bugs, and like it's a 70-30 split. You get 70%, we get 30%, and you choose when you want to release it, and you set your price point, and you get to like if there's any updates for the game or patches, like that's free. Like you just basically just gotta let us know, so that way we can have like our bug testers double check to make sure there's no bugs, and that's it. Like I don't see how it's any different from like it will be putting it on Steam, where I'm pretty sure Steam asks basically just those same things.
Any more thoughts on this subject before we cut to break?
I got nothing.
I'm sensing by the silence that we are ready to have an inter...
I think that we're right before we go into part 2, because that's going to turn into us squealing about what our favorite indie games are, right? That's
Yes.
pretty much what it's going to be. Like, oh, this game is amazing!
Yeah, we're going to put the spotlight.
I think one thing we should just quickly bring up is, what do we think is... Are indie games important? I know this sounds like a really stupid basic question, like, is the sky green? But do we think indie games are important, and why?
Well, of course the sky is green.
The sky is green, the clouds are blue, the grass is brown. Like these are like common facts.
Only in Kirby, only in
it's in,
Kirby
Fallout
Adventure
3.
does that work.
And in Fallout 3, probably.
Fallout 3. Are indie games important? I think absolutely. Not only does it promote competition in the gaming industry, it also gives us new ideas when we want to take a nice refreshing break from the endless barrage of sequels and prequels and reboots and all this schlock that the big guys seem to be putting out because they're afraid of taking a chance. I absolutely think they're important.
Yeah, the rise of indie games really is kind of shown to me that gaming isn't something you get into after years of schooling and getting into the right company. It's just something you can do in your basement and just make a game because you want to make a game. And the rise of all these games out there just makes it open to more people to start doing things and try it for themselves.
I think part of the thing too is like, at least this is like me like briefly going to the hopeless romantic aspect. Like, you know, like the indie developer is just like that success story that just makes you feel good inside. Like it's these little guys with this game that like no publisher wanted to put money into, but they figured out a way that they could get it out there for people to buy and play, and the thing just takes off like a rocket. So I think that like part of that is part of the reason why we like indie games so much, is like if these guys can do it, why can't I?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that Indie Game the movie is kind of the movie that got me into thinking that I could start making games, and since then I've tried to go down that path and learn code, and you know, that wasn't something that was available to me a few years ago, so it's pretty big to me.
I think, and this is kind of going to be a crossover into part 2 here, but I like indie games because they have the ability to not be polished. They have the ability to try something new. They have the ability to try to be an art form, or like try to do something that's new, and they're not trying to make strictly, you know, a blockbuster. And they are allowed to do that because sometimes they're not in it for the money, and then when it pays off, you know, for a big name company, they'd be like, oh, that's not a win, that's a loss. But then you look at Braid, and you look at all these other games like Limbo, where it's, you know, just black and white and almost no sound, and it's considered to be terrifying and artistic and all this. It's great to see that, and it's great to see that you can have those where Super Meat Boy, where it's just ridiculous, stupid graphics, and it's, you should be on at least 3 cups of Red Bull in order to play that game because of the speed of it. And be like, well, why would you do this? Why would you even try? There's a game on Xbox Live right now called The Impossible Game.
Oh,
Look it up. It's ridiculous. It's just absolutely weird and crazy. It's literally, to the sound of music, a box jumping over little triangles, and you're trying to do it either. And it's really hard because it's pretty much a platformer stripped down to just being a platformer with a decent techno song in the background. And you'll never be able to get that. any other way, but I know a lot of people that have devoted hours to playing the impossible game just to know they can do it, and they've had a lot of fun trying to just beat something like that. You couldn't get that in AAA. You couldn't.
Yeah, that reminds me of Flash games back in middle school. It's
Yeah.
kind of just, it's moved to be bigger now, which is nice.
So have we satisfied your question, Wyatt?
I'm never satisfied, but it'll have to do.
You'll have to suffice. You'll just this once. So on our second half, we will shift the discussion to shining a spotlight on some great indie games that we have all played and love and enjoy, and talk about some up and coming ones. And we will go into all of that after this nice little intermission. You'll have some music, so buckle your pants, everybody. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this episode of Downloadable Content discussing indie games. We're all still here. Ron's still around, John's still around, and Wyatt Old Sport is still around.
All sport.
Old Sport! One of these days, Wyatt, when you come to my place, it'd be a really expensive gimmick to pull off, but I'd have to rent a tux and then get a wine glass and just be like, here you go. Anyway, Gatsby reference for those of you listeners out there.
Old sport. Sorry.
Read a book, people. All right, so on this second half, now we've had a good lengthy discussion in the first half, we're going to give some time to indie games that we love and enjoy very much. And I think all of us here have played at least one or two.
At least.
At least one or two to go around. So let's see. As the oldest surviving member of Downloadable Content, Ron, I'll start with you.
Let's see. Let me look at my Steam library and try to avoid the obvious ones. I don't want low-hanging fruit. I will go with. I'm gonna double check and make sure that they're indie developers. I'm pretty sure they are. I will go with FTL, Faster Than Light.
I have heard nothing but horrible things about that game. And by horrible, I mean amazing about what it does to you.
Yes. Brian, the best way I can describe it to you is Oregon Trail in space.
All right, keep going. I'm interested.
You are a ship you are transporting some important information from one side of the galaxy, quadrant, whatever you're in, to the other side. Along the way, you will come across various random occurrences. For example, you can come across a planet that is asking for help because they have a plague outbreak on their plan. They want your help. You can choose to help them, or you can choose not to help them. Guess what happens if you help them?
You have died of dysentery.
Yeah, one of your criminals will probably die of illness. The game is very brutal. The game, it is very brutal. There's a lot of. If you try playing it straight without pausing the game to plan out your next move, you probably will die. A very painful death. You can get boarded, and if your ship taken over by once your crew gets killed, and then it's game over. You can burn up in the sun. You can die in an asteroid belt. You can have no power in a nebula and have your crew suffocate. You can suffocate your ship to kill out fires. That usually means that you risk suffocating your own crew as well. And there's lots of other things too. And if you get to the end, if you somehow get to the end, keep in mind too, like you're fighting ships, you're upgrading your ship as you go along with scrap metal and things like that. You have to fight the final boss, and the final boss is a 3-parter final boss that you probably will die on the first playthrough if you get to the final boss. You probably die in the second playthrough. You might even die on the third playthrough.
Hell, you might even die on the 4th playthrough.
Yeah, like you literally have to like go through on various ways and upgrade your ship in certain ways, so that way when you get to the final boss, you can deal with all 3 of those modes. Because basically, like every time you die, you have to learn like what each mode does. Like mode 1 is cloaking. Mode 2 is drones. Mode 3 is he shoots lots of lasers at you. And mind you, all this difficulty I'm describing to you, that's easy setting.
Yeah, naturally. Of course it is.
Yeah, now, but keep in mind, the game is very fun. I really enjoy it because it's playing fair. Like, everything that like, all these ships that I'm describing, and, like, even the final boss, like, cloaking and drones and lots of lasers, you can do that, too. It's just that you have to invest more into it when you have limited amount of energy and weapon slots available to you for doing these things.
Interesting. That sounds like an interesting game. And just for all of you listeners out there who have played this or are interested in playing it, it is available on Windows, Mac, and Linux.
Yeah, I have mine copied through Steam. I'm pretty sure it's like $10, $15 at most.
It was made by the indie studio Subset Games, and it is a top-down real-time strategy game, for those of you who are interested in those. Single player. I don't think there is a multiplayer here.
No, there is not.
And this was one of the very many games that was funded through Kickstarter, and it was a resounding success. According to Wikipedia, this game exceeded its funding goal by 20 times. In English, they succeeded in obtaining 20 times more money than they had initially sought. So the extra money they used toward more professional art, music, and in-game writing.
Yeah.
So, Oregon Trail in space. I know April really likes playing the Oregon Trail. I wonder if this is something she...
Yeah, and probably the best thing, too, is, like, it doesn't take you that long to load, like, to start from over to get back to where you were. Like, maybe 20 minutes. And there's multiple ships you can go through, and there's also alien races as well, with various bonuses and minuses as well, so...
Yeah, just as a point of reference, the initial Kickstarter they wanted 10,000, they got 200,000
Jesus.
with almost 10,000 backers. So
People like their Oregon Trail.
they must.
Ooh, speaking of Oregon Trail and segueing pretty well into another indie game,
Go ahead.
I saw this game at PAX called Oregon Trail. It's essentially
I've heard of
I was
this.
about to
is-
mention that, yeah.
it is Oregon Trail with zombies, and it plays exactly like it would have back on the Commodore. And it's available for I think Android, iOS, Steam, pretty much anything you can get your hands on. And it's hilarious because it plays exactly the same, except occasionally you'll go scavenging for supplies, and there'll be a boss fight, and a giant zombie bear will come to attack you. Or you'll be driving, and then suddenly a horde of zombie deer will try to destroy your car. And it's really addicting considering it feels exactly like the old Oregon Trail, except not. And I mean, I'll boot it up on my phone every once in a while and lose hours to it. Also, you get to name your friends and watch them all die horribly to zombies.
It's billed as a retro zombie survival game that again parodies the Oregon Trail. It was developed by a studio called The Men Who Wear Many Hats, which just alone sounds hilarious. It was initially released released as a Flash-based browser game, and then later on a Facebook app. Then we had the director's cut, which was posted on Steam Greenlight, and then was released on Steam for Windows, Mac, and Linux. There is also an Android version of this game, so it is available on Ouya.
I think it's one of the bigger titles to come out on Ouya too.
The Oregon Trail. I just like the name. Don't mind me.
Actually, it's on the most current Humble Bundle right now, which is, I think, Humble Bundle for Android 6, and it also comes with the Steam code for the game. So you can get it on Android and on Steam for whatever you want.
Yeah, and I mean, we've already mentioned that Steam has, a lot of games and a lot of sales, which gets a lot of these games out to the public. The director's cut of Oregon Trail, they wanted 3,000. It was funded through Kickstarter. The director's cut was funded through Kickstarter. They wanted $3,000. They got just over $16,000. So, not a lot of expense for what, by all accounts, from what you've been talking about, has been a pretty popular game.
Yeah.
All right, Wyatt. You're on.
Oh, do I have to?
Yes, yes, honey.
Okay, where
You
do
can do it,
begin?
sweetie.
One of the first indie games that I really played and that keeps coming to my mind is Bastion and Castle Crashers. I downloaded Castle Crashers when I was a resident assistant at SUNY New Paltz, and I actually ended up using that to run events and get people out of their rooms and just playing 4-player Castle Crashers in my own lodging area or just out in the main lobby. We would play for just hours. Castle Crashers, this is related to Battle Block Theater. It was one of the games done by the Behemoth, which is the ones who also did Alien Hominid.
Yep.
Who did those Flash games, and they kept escalating. Castle Crashers was just great, like old beat 'em up like Streets of Rage, but with with the ridiculous humor that the Behemoth is known for, including way too many poop and fart jokes. And they moved on, and I just remember loving that game. One of the next ones that I remember after that was Bastion, and I will let someone else field Bastion because we can talk about that one forever. Again,
I'll field Bastion when after you're done.
Absolutely, there was three indie games that I saw when I went to my first PAX for the full 3 days in PAX East 2011, and it was Bastion, It was Orcs Must Die and Skulls of the Shogun. I had no idea about any of those games before I went there. I went there and I was just amazed to be able to talk to, this is kind of going back to part one a little bit, but it was great to talk to the developers right there. It was great to see the people that had made the game, that had poured their souls into it. And all three of those games were fantastic. Orcs Must Die is just pretty much tower defense, but with snarky humor and just, we're going to take the plot and kind of go, oh, there's a plot, but we're mostly here just to cause as much mayhem as possible. Skull of the Shogun is much more of your turn-based strategy with some really great biting humor. I'd really suggest looking for it. It just came out on Steam, but get it for Xbox Live because I need more people to play multiplayer it with. All three are really good games. And then the one that I've been playing, and I will be good about this, I promise you, Brian, I just got State of Decay.
All right. Go on. You can talk about it.
I'm allowed? Okay.
Yeah, go on. That's what this whole second half has been devoted to.
Okay, fine. I'm allowed to fanboy this much. The thing about State of Decay is that I don't... Zombies are an overblown cliche that drive me nuts sometimes. And they're just everywhere, and that... State of Decay is really a game that takes zombies and that idea of it. It's not Call of Duty zombies, it's not Halo zombies, it's not zombies in space. It feels like you're going back a little bit. You're going back to the ideas in Night of the Living Dead, or in some of the older Romero, where the zombies, they do run a little bit, but they're mostly shambles. You do have special zombies, but it's mostly you are now trying to live in the middle of the zombie apocalypse, not just survive, not just run through, from point A to point B with a gun like in Left 4 Dead, but you're immersed into this open world, sort of like Grand Theft Auto meets the zombie apocalypse. That's the easiest and quickest way I can describe it. So you're dropped in with a little bit of story, and you find yourself at a church with one or two other characters. And once you get there, you find yourself that once you have enough trust, you can substitute in and out for all the different characters. And what you're doing with them is you're trying to find supplies. So you're going into the houses of the nearby towns that are filled with zombies, and you break into them. But if you break into them the wrong way, you might make too much noise, and the zombies are attracted to noise. You can search for supplies, because if you don't have enough food for your house, the people there will become starving, morale will decrease. If you don't have enough ammunition, they can't cover you as easily. You won't be able to get resupply from your storage locker. If you don't have enough medicine stored up, the flu, just the regular flu, can hurt you. If you don't build a medical facility, your people won't recover, and you have to switch between members, because the more you play as just one member, the more and more injured they become, the more and more tired they become, and they need time to rest. So you have to switch out and go through this entire community trying to live. If you lose a character to the zombies, that when you'll be in a house, and this will happen, I promise you, if you're playing a game and you're searching, and you make too much noise while searching, and you'll see on the mini-map a whole bunch of red lights flicker in, and you'll see them all descend onto the house and climb in through all the windows. And it's terrifying, because it really brings back that feeling of, this is the zombie apocalypse. And yes, you can be really, really good. You can have your machete, which all break over time. You can have your AK-47, but the AK-47 makes a lot of noise, more than a pistol, more than anything else. And the more noise you make, the more zombies can hear you. You'll attract the entire town. If there's a wandering horde nearby, they'll come into the house looking for you. You really get that feeling of just that oh shit moment that you really are supposed to get when you're playing against someone that's not thinking, not feeling, just wants to bite you. And it's really great for that reason. And I'll end it there.
Yeah, I mean, just when I was, I watched Wyatt play this game when I was at his place last, and watching him play the game, he could never do a let's play of this game, because every other word out of his mouth was either fuck or nope or oh Jesus or tra la 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 la. That was standard Wyatt. But yes, State of Decay, which apparently right now is very popular on Xbox Live. Right now it's only on Xbox Live. They're looking to release it for Windows. It was made by a studio called Undead Labs.
Check them out. Check out their website. What's really great is that they've been doing an update pretty much every single day with the community. They really are invested in it. They are working very well with Microsoft. Microsoft will continue to fund them simply because they are doing so well. It is a business, and they will reward good business. And they're doing a great job, and they're looking to expand. They're really hoping to. And the game does have a lot of bugs, and I'm going to be writing a follow-up about this. You can actually read about this on my blog, which is spritesanddice.blogspot.com. I write it with John, who's also here on the podcast. but I
Hello.
I did a review of State of Decay, and it's very much, yes, it is bugged. I actually have not been able to play the game for about a week and a half because I managed to get to the end of the game, get everything. I stored up just enough survivors where there's a bug in the game that if you have too many, you can't load the game anymore. There's ones where I've been barricaded in a house trying to fight off against a big bad guy, and I've seen a zombie flicker into existence through the door at me, and I promptly had to pause the game and walk away because I was terrified. It flickered through the next wall, and ended up I heard screaming from the partner that was with me, like, "Oh, there's a zombie!" And I was just thankful it wasn't me. But there are some bugs. It is an open world game, and any open world game has bugs. But they've already done one title update, and Microsoft has okayed it. They're coming out with their second one next Monday, and then I'm going to be doing my follow-up when I finally beat the game. They're going to be adding a co-op version, and they're adding a survival mode where there's not going to be a story. It's just going to be survive as long as you can in this apocalyptic neighborhood. And with a few exceptions, everything depletes. Your weapons will break over time unless you repair them. Your cars, you can repair some of the damage, but if you blow one up or if you lose it into the water, it's never coming back. Once you raid a house of its goods entirely, those never come back. So you really do get that feeling you have to move around. You definitely get that zombie apocalypse feel, and you can feel the love they put into the game. I already downloaded the soundtrack just for my own writing music because it's got that wonderful feel to it. I really recommend it.
Yes, it also helps when, State of Decay was made by one of the co-creators of World of Warcraft. So, little help there. So, all right, on to me. Wyatt initially said Bastion, but now I'm going to field Bastion. It was the first indie game I played, and my introduction to Bastion was at PAX East 2 years ago. 2 years ago? Or three? Three at this rate. I don't remember. But this was a game that was released by Supergiant Games, and it was published through Warner Brothers. And it is available on Xbox Live Arcade. It's available on the iOS, Linux, Mac. It's also on OnLive, interestingly enough. This game it's a short game. It's about 6-7 hours. I think when it was released it was about $15. Don't know if it still is. But it's presented in a 2D sort of isomorphic style of play. Think games like Sonic 3D Blast. That type of camera angle, and it's basically a fantasy themed western is probably the best way I can put it. The game you play only as one character. His name is the Kid. He has no name. He's just called the Kid, and he moves around the world, basically these floating environments, like the paths that you can walk on rise up to meet the Kid as he's progressing through the level, which also can be a bit of an issue because you can fall off the world. Oops. And you're trying to figure out the main plot point is trying to restore the world after an event called the Calamity, which was the result of a weapon used that ultimately wiped out most civilization. Along the way, it has some strategy elements, some RPG elements, experience points, currency, which you can use to buy upgrades to weapons, power-ups, things like that. This game has a New Game Plus. You're faced with an option at the end of the game, which will determine the ending. And the soundtrack is amazing. I met the composer for Bastion, and I did my damnedest not to squee in front of him. We actually had a 20-minute chat or so talking about video game music. Great stuff. Very, very has that Western theme to it. It's The game actually has done so well that this past E3 that just happened, Sony showed off Supergiant's next project, Transistor. The interesting thing is that Transistor was not shown during the 4-minute segment where they showcased indie games. They stuck Transistor in their main lineup. This is one of those situations where, an indie developer, just right at the right time, got hot and did incredibly well, and now they've ascended. Just on one game. That's it. But now they're in the discussion of AAA sort of type games, which is great. I was like, when I saw the Sony press conference, I'm like, okay, I see Transistor. I saw gameplay demo of this at PAX. Looking forward to it. It's going to come out next year. And I'm like, oh, you didn't put Transistor with your indie lineup. That's interesting.
Yeah, what's that going to mean? I mean, this is one of those things where you become the man. I don't mean that in like a bad way. Just, where is that lineup? Because now they're becoming Supergiant Games has become so large that it's got its own issues. Slight side jump. There's another game company that I really liked called Trendy, who made a game called Dungeon Defenders. It was a really cute tower defense. It was casual enough, but it was also advanced enough that you could play through. It was on Steam. It was really cheap. They would constantly come out with small packs of information, but they became really big, and they had to get more and more people to work in the company. And now there's actually huge issues because they've become their own gaming company. And there's actually been a huge bunch of issues about having to work too many long hours because now there's too much responsibility, sexism in the office, all these other horrible things that have happened to this game company that struck it too well, almost. Which I hope that doesn't happen to Supergiant Games because I love those guys. They're amazing. Like you said, Brian, the game's fantastic. The guys who made it are really cool. The soundtrack is amazing. It's a weird mixture of Western and Indian music and then modern.
Yeah, and the soundtrack is actually available for purchase on Amazon and iTunes, so it's that good. Alrighty, well, we'll go around again. We'll go back to Ron. I know you've got
I want to go.
You got at least one more in you.
Yeah, I'm looking through my list now. I'm gonna go.
I think we'll be good for one more from everybody.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I'm gonna pose this question to you guys, and if you consider this an indie game or not. Do you consider Minecraft to be an indie game?
I've never played it. I have no opinion.
Yes, though I think absolutely everyone knows about it at this point.
Yeah,
it had very humble origins. It's just become a phenomenon all of itself.
Yes,
I just picked up a poster from GameStop, like a promotional poster from them that they were throwing out for Minecraft because it's become such a hit on Xbox that they're advertising it in stores.
Yeah, I mean, I was just proposing that to you guys. How about Terraria?
I've never heard of it.
2D Minecraft, but I haven't played it.
I've heard amazing things, and again, it's one of those where its fame is making it. People are like, "Is that an indie game?" I'm not really sure anymore.
Yeah,
it is classified as it is officially classified as an indie game. So, Ron, take it away.
I forget who said it, but one of the two people said what it was, and it basically hit it on the head because it is basically just 2D Minecraft, but there's a lot more play to it than that. It's got like this 1632-bit art style, looks like an SNES game almost. You basically you spawn into a random world and you just go, build, have fun, do whatever. You make yourself weapons and armor and houses, and you can explore the world. There's the briefest hints of a story, like the very, very briefest hints of a story. Because basically, if you dig down deep enough in Terraria, you get to hell, and there's ruins of buildings. There was actual buildings in hell, so it seems like people actually lived down there at one point in time. But you don't know what happened, and there's like never explained. But probably the thing I like most about Terraria is like it is basically Minecraft, but you don't need to know how to run a server. You basically, if you want to play with friends, you basically all you can do is just create a world, and you share your IP address with your friends, and then they can just play with you in that world, and you guys can explore the world and have fun in it together. Because there's the PvP option as well, where you just like click to be on red team, and another person clicks to be on blue team, and then you just start fighting each other for fun.
I'm looking at the information now, and it was made by a developer called Relogic, and it's on Windows, PlayStation Network, Xbox Live Arcade. It was also made. It will be coming out on the Vita, and then smartphones and tablets. And a very well received, this game. It basically. A lot of people give it praise for how deep it's full of depth, they seem to say. It definite focus on exploration and feeling of accomplishment. And it's a sandbox game. And so basically it's a do whatever the hell you want sort of thing. So there you go. Moving right along, John, you have another?
I'm going back to my favorites from PAX, but anyone who saw the PS4 press conference at E3 might know Octodad.
I saw that on the press conference, and I looked at it with one of those "what the fuck" sort of.
Oh, it was, I think, probably one of my favorite games that I played on the PAX East show floor this year, and essentially. You're an octopus who wants to live a normal human life, and you have a wife and kids, and the point of the game is just to do everyday things like, clean the kitchen, make burgers for the kids, mow the lawn in the backyard, go shopping at the supermarket. But the trick is you're controlling an octopus, and he doesn't walk very well like a human. So what you end up doing is controlling a ragdoll. The left and right mouse buttons would control his left and right foot, and you kind of just drag him along these environments as he just knocks stuff over while his arms are flailing, and then you go to control his arms to pick something up, and then you just knock everything off of a table. And it's just one of the most entertaining games I've played in a long time. There's actually their kind of proof of concept version on their website that I think they made as a final project for school or something. That it's essentially the same game but much lower res, and it's a lot of fun. I suggest people check it out.
I mean, this, I think, if I remember the press conference correctly, this was made by a group of university students.
Yeah,
DePaul University students. They made it in 3 weeks for their final project for their video game major. They have DePaul's a video game development creation degree at their school, and that's their final project. Essentially, the entire class works on one gigantic video game demo, or working video game itself.
This game is available on Windows, Mac OS, Linux. It's also going to get a PS4 release. And Wyatt, it looks like the perfect game for you. Because of the awkward control scheme. It's described as being, quote, a man piloting another man from inside his head, according to the producer of the game.
I've also heard it referenced as 3D
Why?
co-op.
Oh, jeez.
There's a lot of slapstick in the game. And yeah, I saw the press conference, I'm like, what the hell? But so it goes, apparently. Wyatt, back to you.
Oh, I feel like I've done enough fanboying because I did Bastion, I did Castle Crasher, I did all that wave. One thing I will bring up really quick then, which you might not anticipate, would be two quick games. I won't talk long about them. That are really good for casual players and for those of you out there that have a significant other that aren't really a gamer. So you have a girlfriend that might not be into video games that much, but we still wants to like have fun with you, trying to play video games, hobbies otherwise. Two games that I've actually had a lot of success with that have been indie games, so they were cheap, they were affordable, and they were a lot of fun because they weren't these polished AAA games. One was A World of Keflings, and that was that's an arcade game on Xbox Live, where it's pretty much like just a very cutesy small version of The Sims, where you use your avatar as a giant walking around with Keflings and building things by picking up resources and moving them around, and you can play co-op in the World of Keflings version. So me and my girlfriend Jess were able to play that. We played that for hours. Just it's a small little idle side game, and it was just really fun because it was just this very lighthearted game that didn't have to take itself too seriously. So I think it's a really good example of what an indie game can be. You can have these very big artsy pieces like Limbo, like Braid, these really dramatic pieces like Bastion, these hilarious action-paced insane ones like Castle Crashers, like Battle Block Theater. But then you can have the other side where you can just have just casual games that don't have to take themselves too seriously, or they have their own art style. So yes, definitely check out World of Keflings if you like that sort of Sims-ish environment. You want just a quick game to kind of jump in and jump out and not get sucked in, like with games like Civilization. And then the other one is Elo Milo, which is possibly I die of cute every time. Like I can't play for very long because it's pretty much a red blob and a blue blob that are trying to find each other, and they always leave at the end of the day and they can't find each other again. And if you're playing two-player, you control the red blob and the other person controls the blue blob, Elo and Milo. And you're trying to move along, and you're pretty much moving along these cubes that are just in space with these very artsy, bizarre backgrounds, and you can only move in a straight line and move items, and you're trying to find the other person somewhere in the map. Playing with two people is a lot of fun. It's like a $10 game. Definitely looking at that, and even though it's a very cutesy game, you're like, oh, this is very kiddish, very childish, the puzzles will make your brain hurt. You should definitely try it out if you like puzzle games. And I'm good.
You're good. All right, in that case, I will close with two more, and then we will put this to bed. The first is a quick game. It showed me this game, and it's hilarious. Happy Wars. It was made by the developer Toy Logic, and is available only on Xbox Live. And it's basically an online multiplayer role-playing strategy game. It does have a little bit of a story-driven single player, but the emphasis of this game is multiplayer, and it's 15 on 15 beat the crap out of each other in the most hilarious, cartoony, and most comical way possible. The object is to have the most number of respawn towers built, or to conquer the other team's castle by destroying their big tower within 15 minutes. And if the score is tied at the end of 15 minutes, it goes to sudden death. The first team to build a tower wins. You are given the ability to choose one of three classes: warrior, mage, or cleric. Each one have their own strengths and weaknesses, and all of them have a bevy of power-ups and equipable items, some absolutely hilarious looking ones. You can also, and those are obtained either by unlocking them through gameplay or through chance, or you can pay, microtransactions, using Microsoft points to get said items. There are some items that can only be purchased with Microsoft points, but they are pretty much kind of cosmetic. They don't really affect gameplay.
Yeah, just on Brian's point that it is a free-to-play game. It's like one of the few free-to-play.
Yes!
It was actually the first free-to-play game on Xbox Live, and it's opened up the door for that, which is really good. And I will say it's very much a good free-to-play game. It's not a pay-to-win. In a lot of ways, yes, you can pay to get some of the better items quicker, but like League of Legends, most of the stuff that you're going to get is stuff that you will get on your own through time, and if you're spending extra money, you're spending it for cosmetic things. Or for speeding up your progress.
when this game was released, it is the first free-to-play game on Xbox Live. When this was released, there was a lot of glitches. A lot of people were like, free! And sometimes trying to get into a match was a hassle in itself. But patches have been released, and
I remember
it works pretty well. It works pretty well, so it doesn't cost anything. Even though it wasn't really critically well received, I should say, I still enjoy the hell out of it. It's good, it's quick, because there's no plot or anything really serious. You can do a very quick, 1 or 2 matches, or play as long as you like. And the
Free-to-play games usually kind of ignore that entire review and setup. It's just under the radar. So, but definitely check it out. It's free-to-play. I do know they are promoting on Xbox Live.
Yep. And the last game I will close with is Battle Block Theater, because just to get under Wyatt's skin.
Can you just put on the "It's a Secret" song for 20 seconds?
Oh, sure, I can do that. I can do that right here.
And this will explain everything. Don't say anything else about the game. Just put on this song for 20 seconds.
Secret. It's a secret. It's a secret.
I will say about the game, now that you've heard that bit of mindfuckery, it is a platformer. It was made by the Behemoth, which we've already mentioned. They've done Castle Crashers and Alien Hominid. And it is a hilarious and difficult platformer. There's a reason why you have infinite lives. And the dialogue is just outright hysterical. The narrator, for those of you who are familiar with a lot of the stuff on the website Newgrounds, the narrator is voiced by Will Stamper, and he both snarks and praises you while you go through the game. It's 8 worlds of hilarity. And just to make it even more interesting, this is a game that will destroy friendships. Just saying. If you play
Monopoly?
If you play the co-op mode, this is one of those games that will destroy friendships, especially if you're playing with Wyatt.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you there. This is not because you're not playing against each other. You're playing with each other. You will be screaming. You will be cursing at your friends, and you'll probably be, if you are of legal age, drinking heavily by the end of it.
It is a fun game. I love it immensely, and there's tons of replay value. You can make your own boards. You can go online and play with other people on Xbox Live. It's just absolutely, it's a great platformer. I love it. And yes, the soundtrack. So, just we'll leave it at that. All right, I think we've had a nice long chat about indie games. We've talked about context, and we've talked about games that we really enjoy. And so, do we have any final thoughts on this? Silence, got it.
Go play indie games.
Go play indie games. Yes, support small developers. Buy indie games. They're out there.
They're out there. They keep creativity alive, and they let you. They're refreshing. It's really great. I've bought more indie games in the last year and a half than I have the brand new, triple published games, because, and honestly, I'll play something like the new Halo 4, and it's a great game. I love it, and I'll play it for hours, and I'll play through it, and I'll play multiplayer, and then I'll load up State of Decay or the Crash of Heroes Might and Magic small puzzle game, or any of the ones we just talked about, and I'll play that for twice as long, and I paid a third of the amount.
So yeah, really, in a lot of indie games, you certainly get your money's worth out of it. Definitely. So, with that in mind, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, or just want to complain, you can do that a variety of ways. You can go onto our Facebook page at facebook.com/downloadable content. You can find us on Twitter at DLContent or email dlcontent1@gmail.com. All episodes are available on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher. Also, check out John and Wyatt's gaming blog, Sprites and Dice.
Yep, spritesanddice.blogspot.com, and we'll be promoting indie games for probably the next month or so. I know that that's what John's been really focusing on since PAX, and we'll be continuing to do that in highlight for this episode. And just because it's something to worth promote, they need the promotion, and I'm glad to do it.
So there we go.
Yeah.
So, it all remains for me to thank Ron, Wyatt, and John. John lived through the episode.
Woo.
Barely.
Woo! All right, everybody. Go play some indie games. Have a good one, everybody.